Some of the best stuff happens right in our own communities, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's where community-based organizations, CBOs, really shine.
Exactly. These are the folks on the ground, maybe people listening right now, making a real difference. And if you are involved, you've probably wondered about keeping things running, properly and legally.
Yeah, and that's just what we're diving into today. We know listeners are connected to this work and want clear guidance on, well, navigating the legal side.
Right. So think of this as our deep dive, and we're leaning heavily on some great work by the Southern Africa Litigation Centre, that's SALC.
Yeah.
They've got some really practical insights on compliance for CBOs.
We should definitely credit SALC for this capacity strengthening info. It's top-notch.
Totally agree. And look, legal requirements can sound, well, a bit daunting.
But we're aiming to break it down, make it understandable, practical. This knowledge, really, it's about empowering CBOs so they can focus on their mission without tripping over legal hurdles. It's foundational stuff.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. According to SALC, what exactly is a CBO? How do they define it?
Well, SALC sees them as organizations working within a community, focused squarely on improving well-being, making things function better for everyone there.
Right.
And a key thing SALC points out is their reliance on volunteers.
Yeah.
And the goal isn't just providing services, it's building the community's own ability to handle its needs, aiming for self-sufficiency.
Building capacity from within. I like that. Now, SALC really emphasizes getting a legal structure sorted and staying compliant. Why is that so important, especially for volunteer-run groups?
Yeah, that's a fair question. SALC argues that a legal structure, even if it seems like extra work, brings real benefits. Think clarity, accountability.
Trust, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Trust from the community. Plus, SALC notes that, frankly, in many places, the law is evolving, and some kind of registration or compliance is now often required to operate legally.
So it's not just nice to have, it could be essential.
Precisely. It might feel like red tape, but it's often about legitimacy and, well, long-term survival.
Okay, so if a CBO decides, right, we need to formalize, what options does SALC say they typically have?
SALC lays out a few common legal paths. One of the perhaps simplest starting points is what's called a voluntary association. You might also hear it called a common law universitas.
Universitas. Sounds a bit grand. What does that mean in practice for a small community group?
Yeah, it does sound old school. But basically, SALC explains it as an agreement could be written, could even be verbal between a couple of people or more to work together formally for a nonprofit aim.
So just agreeing is enough legally?
In principle, yes, for basic recognition as a VA, according to SALC. But, and this is important, SALC also points out that if you want or need to register under specific NPO or NGO laws, then you obviously have to meet those requirements.
Okay, so flexible to start, but registration adds rules. What's another structural SALC talks about?
Another one is a trust. This is definitely more formal. It involves creating a legal document called a trust deed. So a founder gives property or funds to trustees, and they manage it for specific beneficiaries, following the objectives set out right there in the deed.
And how is a trust kept legitimate? Who checks it?
SALC stresses that the trust deed needs to be written, witness correctly attested by a notary public, and then officially registered with the master of the High Court, or the equivalent body.
Okay.
That registration adds oversight. The deed itself is the rulebook, defining the goals and what the trustees can and can't do. It's more structured than a VA.
Definitely sounds more formal, more paperwork involved there. What's the third main type SALC mentions?
The third one SALC highlights is the nonprofit company, or NPC. This is basically a company registered under company law, like South Africa's Companies Act, which SALC uses as an example.
But it's nonprofit.
Exactly. Its purpose isn't to make profits for owners or shareholders, but to pursue a specific nonprofit objective.
And compliance for an NPC. What's the key step there, based on SALC's info?
SALC says the main thing is registration with the Registrar of Companies, or whatever the relevant authority is called in that country.
Yeah.
You follow the company law procedures, just with that nonprofit status.
Okay, so voluntary association, trust, nonprofit company, got it. But SALC also mentions registration as an NGO NPO. How does that fit in? Is it another structure?
Good question. SALC clarifies this really well. Registering as an NGO or NPO isn't a separate legal structure itself. It's more like an additional layer of registration under specific NGO or NPO laws.
So you could be a trust, for example, and also need to register as an NGO.
Precisely. SALC gives examples. In Malawi, under their NGO Act, it seems Registration is mandatory for all NGOs, whatever their structure.
Right.
Whereas in South Africa, under the MPO Act, SALC notes it might be optional generally, but required if you want to do certain things, like send money overseas.
Okay, that clears it up. Structure first, then maybe specific NGO registration on top, depending on the country and activities.
Exactly. And if you register under that NGO-NPO law, SALC stresses you must follow all its specific rules.
Makes sense. And SALC gives us examples of these laws, right? Let's look at Zimbabwe's Private Voluntary Organizations Act, the PVO Act. What's the current situation there, according to SALC?
So SALC explains that, as it stands now in Zimbabwe, the PVO Act generally requires NGOs to register to operate legally or get funding, including government money.
Okay.
The process involves submitting your constitution, notifying the public, and getting approval from the PVO board via the registrar. So for many CBOs, SALC indicates registration is pretty much essential.
Are there exceptions, groups that don't need to register under the current act?
Yes. SALC mentions some exemptions currently exist. State bodies, trusts, religious groups, member benefit early organizations, and purely political ones.
But SALC also flagged a potential amendment to this act in Zimbabwe. What changes might that bring?
This is significant, though. SALC notes it's not law yet. The proposed changes could mean trusts and groups fundraising for charity must register.
Ah, so trusts might lose their exemption.
Potentially, yes. And the registrar might get broader power to require registration from almost anyone. Applicants might also need to declare who really owns or controls the organization.
Transparency focus.
Seems like it. And SALC highlights another point. The minister could designate certain organizations as high risk, maybe for terrorist financing concerns, making registration compulsory for them. It points towards potentially tighter controls.
Okay, definitely something for CBOs in Zimbabwe to watch. Let's switch over to Malawi. What does SALC say about their NGO Act?
SALC points out Malawi takes a different approach. It's compulsory registration for all NGOs, local or international. Everyone has to register with the NGO authority.
No exceptions there?
Doesn't seem like it based on SALC's description. The application needs the constitution, trustee details, ministerial approval of plans, and a fee.
Okay.
And SALC mentions specific things like international NGOs needing at least 2 Malawian directors and a declaration that management won't engage in partisan politics. It's a blanket requirement.
Right, a very different system. So let's say a CBO has done all this, got registered under the right structure, maybe even as an NGO. Are they done with the legal stuff then?
Oh, definitely not. SALC really underscores the importance of ongoing operational compliance. That's crucial. Meaning sticking to the rules of the specific law you registered under, day in, day out. SALC gives examples like filing annual reports, keeping proper accounts, maybe getting audited.
Standard organizational stuff, really.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And SALC also reminds us they need to comply with other laws too, like labor laws if they have employees. It's about continuous good practice.
And SALC gave specifics from Malawi again, didn't they? What does ongoing compliance look like there?
Yes, they did. Under Malawi's Act, SALC details that NGOs have to submit annual audited accounts, activity reports, and annual returns, listing trustees, staff, auditors, and importantly, funding sources.
So ongoing reporting is key.
Very much so. And they have to provide other info if asked. SALC also lists reasons for registration cancellation, like not following objectives, breaking the law, or getting into partisan politics.
And consequences.
Yes, and this is a big one. SALC raises individual trustees, the CEO, or managers, can actually be held personally liable if the organization commits an offense.
Wow, okay. So personal responsibility is a factor. Pulling this all together then, what's the core message from SALC for CBOs listening?
I think SALC's main point is this. CBOs have choices about legal structures, definitely. But the compliance needed really depends on that structure and the specific laws in their country.
Right.
So SALC is basically saying you absolutely must get familiar with the relevant laws where you operate. Understand them, follow them. It's not just bureaucracy. It's fundamental to being effective and sustainable.
Absolutely. Getting the legal house in order seems like a non-negotiable foundation for doing good work long term.
Precisely. And by understanding these requirements, maybe using insights like those from SALC we discussed, CBOs can operate with confidence legally and really maximize their impact.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Think about your own context. What laws apply where you are? Based on what we've heard from SALC today, what's maybe one practical step your CBO or one you care about could take now to check it's on solid legal ground?
Yeah, don't see it as a burden. See it as building that stronger foundation for making a difference.
And this deep dive, drawing heavily on the expertise shared by the Southern Africa Litigation Centre, hopefully gives a really solid starting point for tackling these vital questions.